Hello, and on the gaming table today we're taking a look at a Warmaster battle between the Beastmen and the Norse. So recently Chris and I got together to have a game of Warmaster. He brought along his new Beastmen army, and I had my Norse that were getting their first run against a human opponent, and so we threw things on the table and had a bit of a game. So here you can see the table layout here. Chris wanted to have lots of woods and things so that he could use his ambush tactics, and I thought, yeah, that's okay, let's just give it a go. And so we laid out the terrain like so, and then we put our armies down. And here is a quick look over the armies. So you can see Chris's Beastmen here in all their glory, looking very nice. He's kind of substituted the Minotaurs here for Bestigors, I believe, just because he felt the Bestigor figures were a little bit small. And then on my side, I've got my kind of fairly standard Norse army with quite a lot of Huskarls and Bondsmen, and then some Valkyries and Ulfirina and a few other things. I had the first turn, and so I just moved things up fairly standard in the middle of the table, although I did pull my cavalry back to the centre from their left flank position, maybe trying to go for a flanking manoeuvre on the right. And then Chris had his turn, moved things up fairly steadily, nothing too fancy there. His general character had the Crown of Command and tried to drop an ambush into the woods immediately on my left flank. However, he managed to roll an 11 for that command, so not only did the ambush not come off, but the Crown of Command is used up, and he can't use it for the rest of the battle. In my turn, I tried to steadily move things forwards. I had some failed orders though, and so things didn't go too far. I was making sure to cover the woods with my frontages, basically, as much as I could, so that if there were any ambushes, hopefully they wouldn't do me too much damage. In his turn, Chris pretty much moved up in a line, kept his flanks anchored on two sets of woods on his side of the table, and moved his general to try and set up ambush again on my side of the table. Obviously, I could see he wasn't going to come to me, and he was going to try and use ambushes, but I thought, it doesn't matter, we'll just get stuck in. Chris did manage to get off an ambush, put a big brigade of Beastmen in the woods there, and some of them were shooting at my Ulfirina and drove them back, and here you can see he's lined up to get stuck into my left flank. In my turn, I initiative charged back with the Ulfirina and then had a general failure of command across a lot of my brigades, and so nothing really got to move as much as it wanted. That means I wasn't really getting to grips with the Beastmen, and also I was leaving my flanks exposed on the left, which wasn't very good, but nothing much you can do with failed command rolls. My Ulfirina managed to kill off a unit of Ungor and fell back with only minor casualties, but then in Chris's turn he charged me with his brigade on initiative and also managed to get more ambush reinforcements coming into that wood. So my flank was getting beaten up now. I lost a couple of units over there, and so things were getting pretty messy for me on my left. For my counterattack, I detailed a couple of units to charge into those Ungor and Gore and kind of clean them up a bit on the left flank. Unfortunately, though, the rest of my army basically failed commands. My cavalry went nowhere, my war mammoth went nowhere, and at the top right of the picture, you can see a big brigade of Huskarls and Bondsmen. They were going to go get stuck into the main line of the Bestigors. However, they failed their charge roll, so they couldn't get in there. So then in the combats here, the Huskarls managed to do quite a lot of damage, as well as a unit of Bondsmen just cleaning up a unit of Ungor in my rear. And so after they fell back in relatively good order, things were not too bad on the left. However, I was kind of a sitting duck on the right there. And so Chris made the expected charge here. You can just see him moving his main blocks of infantry into my exposed Huskarls here. He also managed to get a couple of other charges in on both my left and right flanks. So now the whole line is pretty much engaged for me at the front, and my cavalry's doing nothing in the rear. So on the left, the unit of Huskarls here got killed off pretty quickly, and then in the centre there was this big melee that actually went on for Chris's turn and then into my turn as well, where I had a small counterattack. However, I pretty much lost everything in the middle there, and with all of that core of infantry at the front gone, that actually took me to my breakpoint, and here you can see the position as we ended the game. So it was a pretty resounding win for Chris. He took me to my breakpoint fairly easily in the end by killing off all of my infantry without my cavalry really getting engaged at all. So here you can see the Norse losses, quite a lot there, and it's all of the infantry basically, and that was mainly because Chris managed to get in the first charges because I was suffering from lack of command, and the notable lack of cavalry casualties. Again, my cavalry just didn't pass any orders to be able to get into combat, so no luck for me there. And Chris's losses here are slightly less numerous than mine, and he had a much larger break point, so he wasn't in any danger of losing this one. Again, most of his orders managed to come off. That's just the nature of Warmaster. Sometimes one side does better on orders than the other, but he did have good tactics using his ambushes, even though he lost his Crown of Command early in the game. So, well done, Chris. So, another game of Warmaster down, a loss for the Norse, but we still had a lot of fun doing it. Chris got to learn a little bit more about some of the rules he's less familiar with and to try out his new Beastmen army, and I'm learning to take more care of those woods against a Beastmen army. Anyway, we had a lot of fun today, and I hope you found it fun watching too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.